Today, it's Edwin's Monday evening property rant. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics Wonder. This post covering finance and property news with a distinctively Australian flavour. Monday again, Edwin again. Hi Edwin, how are you going?
Doing well, Martin. How are you?
I'm still here, which is a good thing.
Yeah, it is a good thing. We're all here, and things are getting more and more exciting by the week.
Yeah, and of course, big China D-Decision Day today.
It's the day, Martin. The day, the 8th of the 11th, and it's going to set the policy for the Communist Party for the next 40 years. I mean, our politicians can only go 3 to 4 years at best case scenario, depending on how the property investments are going. But that's as far as we get with our policies. But they really go in for for 40 years at a time.
Yeah, and I'm quite interested that the media here in Australia really hasn't given this enough focus. Right, this is a big deal.
It's a huge deal. It's going to determine what happens, moving forward. Look, I can say that, and this is just hearsay, obviously from a WeChat chatterers out there, and there's the parties divided as to whether or not they go to war or whether or not they pull back. But one thing for sure is that they're of the understanding that they believe that America's played its cards, and quite frankly, as far as the WeChat chatterers are concerned, based on the information that's propagated there in mainland China, what they're saying is whether it's a slow walk in or a fast, and one of those overnight things. They're moving into Taiwan. There's no two ways about it. That's the reports that we're getting. The only thing that the party's divided in, from what we've been told, is how quickly they're going to move. But they know that America is a lame duck at the moment.
And is it true that they've also changed their international travel policy as well?
Well, that's another thing that Dusty and Evan have been reading about on WeChat, and they looked at the policy. Obviously, it's a 5-1 policy. Basically, what it meant was that only one plane per country was to depart any Chinese city per week. And they were also going to take in one plane per country, whether it be a city anywhere in Australia, whichever city that may be. That was one per week. Now, my understanding is that that's also now been reduced and scaled down by an extra 36% or so. So anybody that's put their hopes on students, the little brothers and little sisters to come over to work, or get tourist visas and then overstay their visa and stay back for work, do fruit picking or labouring jobs or any other type of job that's a low paying job. Well, you can whistle Dixie as far as we're concerned, and obviously that's going to have an effect on the student accommodation, investment properties, and the like that many have taken advantage of in previous years, when they would amass anywhere between 4 and 6 people in a 2-bedroom apartment, let alone amassing 3-4 families in a 3-bedroom house in the North Shore.
Right, and I also understand that the stockpiling of various goods in China is also going through the roof too.
Well, that's it. And that's something that the mainstream media isn't really reporting on here. And that is, obviously, they don't know, and it'll take them a few more weeks to cotton on. They, first of all, have to read Zero Hedge and some other international commentators with regards to China before our mainstream pick it up. But look, that has been very low key. I mean, it's been very highly censored. The material that Dusty and Evan they get it in different ways, and in novel and interesting ways as to how they're able to get information from their colleagues over in China, from the alumni, from the universities that they attended and the high schools that they attended, and these people, how they share the information through WeChat, so that the algorithms on the on WeChat don't pick up the wording structure. That is it is interesting. It does get it, and it only stays live for a couple of minutes, if that, before they're able to download it and pass on the information. So obviously the mainstream aren't privy to a lot of that information, but locally, the local Chinese have been told to prepare. But then again, Martin, we brought this up almost 6 months ago in our Monday night rant, and they said prepare for war and prepare for famine. And that's been a catch cry that the local government have been telling, and the mainstream, Tencent and other mainstream media agencies there have been telling the people. But not only that, Martin. Now it's interesting that China itself, or the Communist Party itself, has reached out to America, and my understanding is that they've increased their purchase of corn from the US. Totally bypassed us, and they've gone straight to the US for extra supplies, and they're paying a hell of a lot more than what they were paying in previous orders. In some cases, we're hearing 30% more than what they were paying for previous orders. But they want it, they need it, and you got to ask yourself the question: why are they stockpiling it? Why have they increased their the standard orders? And let me tell you one thing: it's not that bug. It's not that bug, and it's certainly not Evergrande.
Right. Very interesting. Well, we'll continue to watch this with great interest, and eventually the mainstream media here will catch up with what's going on, right? Maybe they should watch our show.
Yeah, well, that's right. Look, it is of interest because, look, sooner than later, this is going to have an impact on what happens with property. Obviously, there's a lot of mainland Chinese that have got investment properties in Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane on the East Coast. So it's going to be it's very poignant. So the mainstream media should be doing a lot more. Should be researching this a lot more, and should be watching the signs that are coming out of China, because it will affect what happens. It could go either way. It's it's a 50-50 call. They could are the investors that are holding on to not only new stock when they first bought, were able to buy secondary stock by way of trusts and companies, where they circumvented the Foreign Investment Review Board, and were able to get secondary property. So are they going to offload these and take the money back home because they need it there more than ever if something scales up to what many believe may happen? Or is that going to stay? Is that just going to stay here permanently, long term? I mean, whichever way, it's going to affect our numbers, and it doesn't take a lot of properties to come on the market to spook the market at the moment. It's been proven in 2020. We got proven from 2019, 2020, and now 2021, where it only needs a few thousand to come on market before the market's spooked, or take away a few thousand before buyers are spooked and they jump in with because of fear of missing out. So numbers play a big role, and we don't need a lot of numbers, as we've been showing year in, year out in our podcast, Martin, with how the numbers have been tracking in terms of for sale listing numbers in Sydney.
Well, come on to the numbers in a second. Just before we leave China, two observations. Clearly, this is having a significant impact on international trade with Australia. So, for example, the iron ore price is down again, and that's a big deal. And in fact, in the latest trade numbers, you could see the influence of that. But also, countries like Germany, for example, are very, very reliant on China. And so if China effectively tweaks the tiller and goes off in a different direction, it could have international implications at an economic level as well as a political level.
Well, exactly. Look, you only have to look at, everybody talks about the supply chain issues and everything else. At the end of the day, let's go back to the root source. Let's go back to where the supplies are coming from. So should China decouple from the Western world altogether, they're in control. And hence the reason why they're saying in the mainland Chinese, the officials there are saying America's played its card recently with this current administration. And quite frankly, the current administration is more hell bent on giving illegal migrants $450,000. So that's why Dusty, myself, and Evan, we're planning a trip back to Ecuador. We're going to walk all the way through Central America, go through Mexico, and collect our 450,000 and then come back here. So together we're going to amass over $1 million, Martin. Then we can buy the penthouse in Opal Towers.
Well, of course, that explains now your bricky skills, right? Because you'll be able to make some money bricking on the way past.
Well, that's right. Well, look, come on, you got to look. This is the trowel that I've been using, Martin. This is the 35-year-old trowel that I've been. I found it. I don't know how the hell. I found it when I did the worked as a brickies labourer for a few weeks in between study periods. But I finally got myself a decent one. So
wow.
But look. But I'm not going to aspire to diversify into bricklaying for sure, Martin. It's what I ended up doing is after I looked at those walls, I decided to bag them quickly before I sent you the videos. I won't necessarily see, but look, at the end of the day, they are level. I put the level on them. They are level at least, regardless, one way or another. We get it level. So Dusty and Evan and myself, we're just going hell for leather, diversifying. Dusty's got her crops up and going that she wants to sell corn to mainland China as well, as our viewers can see, and Evans, diversifying also into, making use of the land and coming up with some novel ideas of how to the old trees that we've been chopping down around the property.
Very, very industrious. And those two trowels remind me of that famous Crocodile Dundee film, right, when he was in New York. And that's not a knife. This is a knife. Well, that's not a trowel. This is a trowel, right?
Yeah. Well, look, my shoulders are absolutely burning. It's just hard work, and hence the reason why you got to respect the tradies. And more so now, because give them a lot. That's our first tip for the show, man. Give our tradies, the tradies that you're going to get working for you, give them a lot of love and respect, and welcome them as soon as they turn up to your place at 7 a.m. to start work. Welcome them with a cup of coffee and a scone, or a cup of tea and a scone, because they do work hard, and particularly with the prices going up, and given the fact that with this. This new mandate that the Chinese government have put in place with regards to travel restrictions, we're not going to get the little brothers and the little sisters that are basically workers, labourers in a lot of the construction industry and with a lot of tradespeople. The tradespeople that about, say, 40-50% of the tradespeople that we use, the local tradespeople that we use, are of Asian background, and they have used a lot of little brothers and little sisters in the past, Martin, and they are absolutely pulling their hair out because they're not expecting anybody to come over anytime soon, and they're inundated with work, and they just can't get enough workers.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, and I think this is going to have a very significant impact on the local economy. Now let's just come back to these listings numbers, because there was an interesting tweet earlier in the week on Twitter, because you actually made the point that the numbers were rising, and they said, why are you celebrating higher listing numbers, right? People need to understand how important these numbers are, because it's the combination of supply, demand, supply, right? And basically, if you have more stuff being listed, that puts downward pressure on property prices. And we're actually already seeing that in a number of places.
Well, that's correct. And as we said from a few weeks back, when we started paying a little bit closer attention to the listing numbers, if you recall, in the first week of August, it was the least amount of numbers on market for freestanding homes that I've ever seen. Domain and real estate had started documenting for sale listings online, and which pretty much when I got involved with domain and real estate was in just before 2000, and around 2000, and it's to only have at that time, I think we tracked 4,964 or 67 at the time, and it was I was absolutely gobsmacked. I thought last year's numbers were very low. But in comparison to this year's, and then soon after that, we got this huge spike in prices because everybody was had this fear of missing out, and we got all these chest beaters and auctioneers online tweeting out all sorts of weird and wonderful achievements in prices, and people, quite frankly, jumping in prematurely. And now that the numbers are climbing, the sentiment's changing, and also with the last week or so of chatter with regards to the RBA potentially raising the rates, and the banks going at on their own without the RBA. So the whole sentiment is changing. So it's interesting for you and I. It's interesting to see, and going back to to the introduction of today's show, it's interesting to see how a small amount of increasing numbers has a huge effect in the sentiment of buyers and sellers. And the agents themselves, is what the chatter that we're getting around the place is, the agents are telling the owners, at this point in time, first offers are generally the best offers, which is the whole conversation around what's happening is changing. But in turn, with this small increase, and yet we're still below the 2020 figures. Imagine, as I believe, that the numbers are going to continue to climb right into early December, which again, it hasn't been. It's unprecedented, but I can see why. It was the lockdown that we had, at the beginning of spring, and secondly, the tradespeople haven't been able to finish and fix these properties up to take them to market. So we're going to get a lot of new listings on market between now and December. And let's not forget, December the 1st was when Gladys was going to give me my birthday gift, and now bloody Dom has taken that away and has pushed it to the 18th, the bastard. So, it's just one of those things. So it's interesting. So all we can see is that these numbers are climbing, and as you said, supply and demand. So, our second tip for the show, Martin, is hold the line.
And there are real examples of properties with a lower asking price, right? So there's one just over $1 million, and now it's revised to what, 950?
Well, see, this is exactly this, and again, this is just one of the many examples. And if our followers also follow us on Twitter, they can other followers share a lot of other examples, obviously, on Twitter, and they can, and a lot of people DM me as well with a lot more information. But this was an interesting one. This one came on the market 4 weeks ago. I was told that this was going to come on the market. It came out actually officially on the market 2.5, 3 weeks ago. But I knew about it beforehand, and I knew that the vendor was an investor that. But regardless of the fact, given the sales in the area, the agent listed it, or the guide was, and the expectations, the vendor's expectations, the guide was a bit lower, but the vendor's expectations was $1.080 million. After I went and saw it, I spoke to one of our clients. They sort of they didn't feel it was for them. Not that we were going to buy it for $1.080 million, because I always said to the agent, look, we're not going to be offering anything beyond much more beyond 900 anyway. So this is where we were, regardless of where the vendor's expectations were at. And we were having those conversations. So I went to market, had all the inspections. People come and went. And then the marketing strategy, the marketing campaign was revised to a guide of 950. And my recent conversation, as I posted there with the agent, is as I said to our buyer, we can go in at quite frankly, let's go in at 890. 870 with then, if they want a bit more, we can go all the way up to 890. And this is my discussions with the agent prior to this text, and this is what he came back to. So basically, what the agent is saying is he may be agreeable to it, because many people are going to be they don't want to be chasing down. In other words, they don't want to be chasing the prices down or trying to keep up with the momentum if the proverbial hits the fan and things go a lot faster. And this is an area, this property is in an area where if the market sentiment changes, it will change rapidly, and people will be chasing prices on the way down, potentially, as even Christopher Joyce said, 25%. And I could see this area is one of those areas that could potentially go down 25 to 30%.
Yes, and one other piece of information which we should just talk about is the auction clearance rates, right? Because the listings are up, the number of auctions are up, but interestingly, the cleared auctions aren't following.
Well, that's right. And again, this just adds to to the whole thing of changing of sentiment, and when you end up with more properties not sold at auction, obviously the markets become spooked. And again, and yet we're still relatively anywhere between 15 and 17% lower listing numbers on market than what we were last year, and this is already happening. So it's a really thin ice scenario. So now this is obviously square meter research, as Louis' research that's been putting out, and I've been following it very closely over the last 4 weeks, and just checking to see where things are going with regards to the auction clearance rates. The only thing that I've got against Lou is that he keeps on forgetting my name. He keeps on calling me Edward. I mean, call me Gomez or call me Lopez or call me Jose, but don't call me Edward. I hate it. But other than that, his numbers are spot on, Martin. And if you look at that tweet, and if you look at the screenshots in that tweet, you'll be able to see how the more listings that come on market, the more properties that are being sold by way of auction, and we've had also a decrease in auction clearance rates, which means next week there's going to be more listings on market. So this week and next week, for many of our clients, is key and instrumental as to whether or not they're going to, been telling them just hold the line. Let's see what happens over the next couple of weeks, because if we get a rise of 1,000 new properties for sale on market, we would just about match last year's numbers. And with everything else that's going on, we may go back in a lot of areas to last year's sale prices, which I say, and I would concur with Christopher Joy from the AFR and other economists, that we will see those 15 to 25, potentially 30% drops in many suburbs of Sydney.
And one final point on the auctions results, of course, Leo Christopher did highlight the fact that some of the other reported auction results from other sources are perhaps a little less reliable.
Oh, look, exactly. And you just got to forget about the domain, forget about real estate, forget about anybody else. You just got to follow Louis on Square Meter Research, or Louis Christopher directly on Twitter, and get the information. It's gold. It's very much on point. Hence the reason why quite a number of mainstream media agencies that that do want to tell the truth will use his figures and will use his commentary. Is straight down the line. And that's all we can say about Louis. So forget everything else that you hear about the place. If you want to read hype in any type of market, you go to Domain and you'll get it, or some of the reporters from the AFR. But other than that, anything that, if you really want to follow the black and white numbers, you go to Square Meter Research.
Yeah, absolutely. And another final point on this is that commissions are actually on the way down too, aren't they? Another sign of a little bit of weakness.
Yeah, well, that as a sideline, that people have got to fight. We said that in 2019. I believe that there was going to be an attrition of real estate agents. A lot of real estate agents were going to be exiting the industry, but what really saved them was the JobKeeper and the handouts from the government. And a lot of offices were getting that just to keep people on board, just to and this is what saved the selling agents that weren't selling, because the amount of agents that are working as selling agents in comparison to the actual sales on a per week basis, it equals out to earnings of less than $500 a week, which doesn't make a lot of sense for anybody to be working in an industry if you're going to be only earning that much. Now, with that in mind, because again, particularly over the last 3 months, we've had a lot of chatter with a lot of different agents from all over Sydney, and one of those sideline and common threads have been that bloody hell, being squeezed on commission. In some places they're down to 0.5%, Mark. Yep. 1%. The average 3 years ago, well, we were talking averages of 1.7 plus GST. 5 years ago, we were talking 2% commissions plus GST. Now I'm hearing more and more of 0.5% just to get the listing. So, look, vendors have woken up to the fact that if agents are only going to be taking days or going from one day to the next to sell a property, well, quite frankly, why should they be paying the 2% when the 2% represents $35,000 commission, or a quarter or half a percent represents $7,500. When you work it out on how many days did the agent work, it's still a hell of a lot of money to earn on a daily rate. So this is what vendors have finally woken up to, that there's not a lot of work that happens in terms of selling the home.
Absolutely. Well, I've heard and seen similar stories too, that, folks, negotiate those commissions before you actually go with an agent, right? And make sure that you're getting good value, because frankly, you can pay them way too much if you're not careful.
Yeah, and they're slipping those incentive clauses where they'll underquote the property to the vendors and to the market, and make more by way of incentive than the commission. And it's all something that fair trading needs to do a lot more investigating on. And look, again, that's another story for another day, but because I could go on and on with that on its own.
Absolutely. And one other thing just to comment on, this idea of buying sight unseen, right? It's still going on, but in the current environment, that's a folly, isn't it?
Look, this is, and this was one of those, one of the messages. This property didn't even have its first inspection, and this is what I was saying to most of our clients is, hold the line, just relax. There's no need. Let your competitors, let our competitors go in there and buy stupidly, and get all the people that have still got this fear of missing out. Let them go in and buy, because the numbers are rising. If the listing numbers were going down and there was less choice, well, then we would take a different approach. But this is another tip for this podcast, and you don't want to be this buyer. I mean, this is just something that the text message that I received from the agent. The owners have instructed us to proceed with an offer received today by a purchaser who was happy to purchase the property sight unseen, the cooling off period waived, and 10% deposit paid. We certainly understand that this is frustrating, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, well, there you go. That's what you get when you get a buyer from Melbourne coming up and buying in Sydney sight unseen, because they think they're going to be missing out. Dumb and dumber is what I say.
No, it's crazy. We've said before, do your due diligence on the way in. And frankly, if you're bounced into a situation where somebody else is prepared to buy it sight unseen, more fool them.
Well, this is now a number of my followers on Twitter actually did a bit of background research on the address and the property, Martin. And one, it's in a flood zone. Two, when I looked at the floor plan and I was looking at it, preparing to go and inspect it on behalf of a client, I noticed that the garage had been converted into a studio, and it had two extra bedrooms, or one storeroom and an extra bedroom attached to it. So you got to work out whether or not council approved and so forth. And that's just from scratching the surface. What else is there? And the other thing is if it was such a great property and they achieved a great price even before it went to the first open, you've got to ask yourself the question: why did the owners want to get out that quickly, given the fact that there was a lot of inquiry, and they took that first offer? Too many alarm bells were ringing on that one.
Absolutely. Well, sometimes people know that they've got a few dodgy issues, and then they can find a sucker buyer, then they'll go with it.
Yeah, exactly. Especially ones coming up from Melbourne.
Right. Now let's just tick off a couple of recent articles which really rounds out the debate quite well. The first one, of course, is this question, the big question of how to tackle housing affordability. And, some people say, well, we should build a lot more stuff. But, there are a few catches, aren't there?
Martin, one of the things that you and I talked about is it's not affordable housing has to go hand in hand with how can I put it, with reasonable housing as well. And there's perhaps a better word with a, a reasonable property to raise a young family. How the hell can you raise a young family in a bloody 360 apartment block complex that's going to be filled up with low income families, and obviously, and I'm not trying to be discriminatory here. My mother and six of us. We spent a few years in a housing commission complex after my parents split up. So I grew up in a what turned out to be a ghetto, or spent a few years, my teenage years in what we would consider a ghetto. And why did it turn out to be a ghetto? Because they put a lot of the families or grouped families into these communities. But back then, Martin, at least it was homes and townhouses where you still had a bit of room to breathe and to move and to ride your bike and to run around, and albeit we created havoc around the place, about the place, and everything else, and so forth. But nevertheless, you created these ghettos and communities where unfortunately crime just seemed to be attracted to these communities. And now we're trying to put them and push them, families of low income, into high-rise developments that have got all sorts of building and construction issues. There's no room to move around for young families. You can't call them reasonable housing. You may call them affordable, but it's not the way to go. I've never believed that piling groups of people of ethnicity or income ratios in a community, and the government throwing these communities up with no real infrastructure, no real ongoing development or maintenance. You get all sorts of issues. You get all sorts of social issues, and that just run rampant through those communities. It's a given. In you got your Mount Druitts, you got your Busbys, you got your suburbs in southwest in Campbelltown, your Rabies and so forth, and your Bonnyriggs, and in your Lethbridge Parks and so forth. All these are just what did they turn into? Turn into slums before. Over the last 15 years, they've been redeveloped because a lot of these housing estates got sold to private owners, and they've been slowly been doing them up.
Absolutely. And, the problem is this concept of build them high, build them small, build them cheap, also means building out and away from a reasonable lifestyle, right? And that's something which, there are stories, in the UK, for example, in the 1960s and 70s, where they did the same thing. So they had these massive estates of very high rise, very small places, but the crime rate went through the roof and they were ultimately demolished. They are ghettos that actually are not really fit for purpose, and yet at the moment they're being pushed by politicians and by, guess who? Developers.
Well, exactly, and that's where that's where you end up with the with all the bags of all sorts of colour and persuasions that in underhanded deals. I mean, look, and there are economists that get on this on this chatter, and they look at affordable housing purely from an economic point of view, which is, I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's not the holistic approach to look at affordable housing, because affordable housing has to encompass lifestyle as well, in the reasonableness of space and lifestyle, and it's got to be fit for purpose, and you can't call a 58 to 62 square meter apartment with a 5 square meter, if that, balcony, fit for purpose for a young family or a small family or a single parent with two kids. You go crazy, let alone with ongoing pandemics and issues and bugs that are gonna be thrown at us. So you've got economists that are talking about rebuilding states, housing estates owned by the government, whether it be state government or whatever. You've got these pundits, because they're not looking at the full picture. You're not looking at the whole thing. First of all, you can't build much for $500,000 now anyway. They talk about releasing land and everything else. Look, even if the land was gifted, even if it was claimed from, let's say, for example, don't stone me, but let's say it was claimed, from a national park, got turned, was going to be subdivided. The earthworks on those subdivisions alone per lot would come to about $175,000, let alone construction of something half decent at $400,000, even spec home. So that throws all that away. Now my view is the government should spread the risk or put contribute to by way of allowance and by way of subsidy, rent subsidies, and let families move around to where they feel comfortable, for schooling reasons, family reasons, support reasons, everything else within limits. So look, it's one of those topics that's got a lot of it's a prickly pear, but I definitely do not agree with lumping masses of people of low income earners or supported by the government by way of health or anything else, in throwing them into high-rise developments. It was bad enough in housing developments, let alone putting them in a high-rise development.
Yeah, no, I have to say that we need to find an alternative path, and part of that has to be an adjustment in house prices over the medium term, in my view. But that's a whole another ball game, which we'll talk about another.
Well, the question that I also asked on Twitter, Martin, is look, with all these policies and all these things that are coming out of the government, the question is you got to ask yourself, how many politicians are renting as opposed to own property, and in there lies the answer as to what we should be doing and what we should have been doing and what we could be doing. When that is answered, you realize what I'm saying, because it's I would say a very, very low percentage are renters as opposed to homeowners, if not homeowners plus have an investment or two up their sleeve.
Well, there seems to me a very strong case for a stronger register of interests around property. And also, I would add to that mortgages as well, because sometimes it seems to me that politicians are making decisions based on their own situation, their own mortgage and everything else, rather than actually for the interests of the broader community. But of course, we never see that, so we never know. I know a few politicians who have huge mortgages, right? And they'd be in terrible strife if interest rates moved up at all. Now, that's archetypal in terms of, if you actually are in that situation, are you going to be more or less likely to do the right thing for the broader community if in fact you're going to get hit in the face by doing it?
Well, that's it, and there lies the answer in the $64,000 question in itself, doesn't it? Where if the political lifestyle was more transparent, if we're able to, if people were more, politicians were a lot more transparent, then we know why they make those certain policies. But isn't it the reason why we've got ICAC and all these other investigations? Isn't that where my friend Gladys, that it's not going to give me my birthday present, it finds herself at the moment? But let's move on, man. Let's move on.
Well, with one flying comment, and that, of course, that we don't have an ICAC at the federal level, which is where it should be as well. So, that's where a lot of the big decisions and the rorting is all going on, and yet they seem to find ways of self-justifying, and the fact of the matter is, people are making decisions in the political sphere for their own interests rather than the interests of the broader community. They have to be much, much more transparent. And frankly, they should be held much more to account by the mainstream media, who also seem to me to be rolling over and just going with it too.
Again, Martin, how many people in the mainstream media and how many reporters do you know that are renting?
Not a lot. Not a lot. Now,
shall I be more poignant and say how many people, how many reporters in the AFR and Domain are renting?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Well, don't get me started on that. Now, before we finish tonight, New Zealand, right? New Zealand's really interesting because, of course, Adrian Orr, the guy in charge of the Reserve Bank in New Zealand, put the interest rates up already, and he gave an interesting speech last week, basically saying people should not actually have all their assets in property. You should be diversifying, right? Actually, quite good financial advice. I'm not sure that you should be giving financial advice, but that was really, really interesting. But there are a few interesting things going on in New Zealand, and this is one that you also picked up on, relating to the level 3 restrictions.
Well, look, I guess with this is moving forward from where we are at the moment in this particular. You call my attention again because it's got a lot to do with the rental arena, and as I've got a heart for the for renters, and without going into too much more detail, as I've shared in our shows, and quite frankly, the industry, I think in New South Wales and in New Zealand, from this article, is showing that they can't have it both ways. You can't have these level 3 restrictions, like it's been proven, and it was challenged in their tribunal, and the tenant won, which is a great win for tenants. And this is something that I've been calling out since, if you recall, one of our first shows when we started talking about the pandemic and what was going to come, and you and I put in place a step-by-step, I think it was 7 or 9 points in relation to what real estate agents should be doing and what you should be asking real estate agents to do when they inspect properties, and more so if you're renting a property, what demands you could and you should be putting on real estate agents. I mean, we were a year and a half ahead of the time, Martin, back then. And so basically this is what it comes down to, is that, the industry has to start respecting more and more tenants, occupants of property that are paying landlords rents. They're paying the rents to have peace of mind, to have if you ask 500, they're paying you the 500. So shut up and leave me alone. And if you want reasonable access, this is my reasonable access, 15 minutes once a week, particularly when there's a pandemic. Quite frankly, in this article, it basically says, no opens, no inspections. And as I said, the industry can't expect the government to pull their way or have it both ways. They can't have the cake, eat everything, and everybody else's cake as well. So we've got to come to that realization. And the tenants of New South Wales, the people that are caught in tenancies, and if we're going to go into further restrictions, if we're going to go into further demands put on the community by the government with regards to shops, shopping centres, other businesses, places of business, and so forth, there is no reason why tenants shouldn't be demanding that the place of residency, as George points out on Twitter as well from ITC, is the once you start having an open house inspection, it effectively becomes an extension of an office, of a real estate office. So therefore, whatever's mandated for the office should also happen in that. In that where you're going to have the open house. So there's a lot more that should be taken account and should be taken into consideration, and more so with the livelihoods and the well-being of the occupants of the property. So I thought it was a great win for the tenants. It's something that we need tenants and tenants advocates here in New South Wales have to push a lot harder for. Because as I said, the government and the industry can't have it both ways.
No, I agree, absolutely. Well, it is a victory, and you've also got a tip for the week, and in fact, you're echoing Adrian Orr.
Well, we've had lots of different tips throughout this podcast, and I guess the for our segment of tip of the week. Look, yeah, many families that I've talked to during the week, whether it be through real estate agents or other colleagues or tradies, look, they're diversifying, and the family members have either lost, the partners have lost their job, or the hours have been reduced dramatically to the point where they're looking at diversity and alternatives, and looking at alternate incomes. And this is why Dusty and Evan are going into they're also diversifying, Martin. Look, they're being creative and diversifying. They're making, there's no rest for the wicked. So here we're all wicked, and we got to work hard, diversify, grow crops to put a tender out to Xi Jinping and diversify and sell gifts. Look, you can't buy gifts in Kmart or David Jones, and that you're not going to have anything. So call Dusty and Evan and put your orders in early for these succulents and cactuses on some original mountain stumps.
Absolutely, that could be very useful as a doorstop, or it might even help building a wall.
You can do all sorts of things with it. We're just having fun. We're just trying to see what we can do. What we can do, making use of what's around. Look, we're enjoying the lifestyle. We're enjoying the lifestyle up in the mountains. We're and trying all sorts of different things. And I guess the biggest tip is stay healthy, bring about some sanity to us. Doing little things like this, building going off and doing the brick walls and doing this and doing that it's more of a therapeutic, shall I say, especially when we have to drive down now that everybody's seems to be back on deck in the jobs, and traffic's becoming mayhem again in the big smoke. But look, with all these pressures, look for something else, look for something to do, look for a hobby, and slowly turn it into an income source, because as you and I have said, Martin, before, harder times are coming in 2022.
Yeah, I think that's probably right, Edwin. And the diversification is good. Don't put all your eggs in the property basket, and look for other alternatives and play the angles.
That's right. That's what you got to do, and keep your ear to the ground, and let's see what these WeChat chatterers have to say to prepare people. And also, I believe the Kryptonians are going to be paying very close attention to see what happens in China with regards to their policy, because I think that's going to have a huge effect on cryptocurrencies globally.
Absolutely. Well, that's probably a topic for another conversation. But Edwin, thanks once again for your time today. As always, very insightful and some very important messages there. And we'll do it all again next week.
We certainly will, Martin. And take care, and all the best here.
See ya. Take care. Bye.